Most likely, after reading this, you will think I'm crazy, and I would not blame you. Maybe I am. All I ask is that you take this with a grain of seriousness, because if what I describe is true, we should all be careful, very careful. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Nikita. I'm 19 years old, living in Moscow in a typical Khrushchevka on the 5th floor, with a window overlooking the courtyard. Ever since school, I've been part of the so-called grey mass, meaning I never had many friends. Just 3, to be exact. Whether they considered me a friend is irrelevant. At least I had some sort of social interaction, and that was enough. I won't even mention any girls. You can guess how that went. My best friend was my computer. There, at least, I could talk to people, endlessly if I wanted to, and that is mostly what I did. My mom is no longer around, and my dad works a lot, often traveling to other cities for weeks or even months. The apartment was practically mine, though I only used my room, the kitchen, and the bathroom. After graduating 11th grade, I bombed the Unified State exam, barely scraping 30 points in Russian. I did not bother to try again right away, deciding to retake it the following summer. My dad was not mad, he just told me to prepare, and if I failed, he'd kick me out of the house. Naturally, I did not prepare at all. I spent my days gaming and binge-watching TV shows. No one needed me except my online friends, and I was perfectly fine with that. I barely left the house, maybe once a week to take out the trash and restock the fridge. This could have gone on forever, but then things changed. Now, here is where the story really begins, and I need to explain it in detail so you get the full picture. It was early spring, March. My birthday had just passed, and only my dad and one friend bothered to call. Things were going downhill. I'd had a falling out with my online friends. As I stood making tea, I thought about how humans are social creatures, and we can't survive without some form of connection. I returned to my room, absent-mindedly scrolling through random profiles, listening to light rock, and pondering the meaning of life. I was waiting for someone, anyone, to message me, but nothing. Maybe they weren't really my friends after all. I just said screw them and placed the empty mug on my desk and shut off my computer. It was already 4 in the morning, and I still was not asleep. My eyes burned from exhaustion, and the lack of sleep was starting to show as dark circles formed under my eyes. As I stood up from the chair, I felt something strange, an almost imperceptible lightness. I ignored it and collapsed into my bed, falling asleep instantly. When I woke up, I could not open my eyes at first. It felt like trying to peel your tongue off a frozen pool in winter. After 10 minutes of struggling, I finally managed to open them. That same feeling of lightness hit me again, like I might float up if I stood too quickly, and crash into the ceiling. But that did not happen. I got out of bed slowly and went to the window. The street was completely empty, no one in sight, and everything outside had the strange, white, foggy look. Oddly, the whiteness did not bother me. I turned and headed for the kitchen. It wasn't until I reached the hallway that I began to feel uneasy. Something was off. Something important was missing, but I could not quite place it. It was one of those things you take for granted, so ordinary that it slips your mind, and yet, the answer felt so close. I started thinking about breakfast. The fridge was almost empty, and all that remained was an old, dried-up sandwich on the table. My eyes wandered to the clock on the wall, almost by accident. The big hand pointed to 1, while the small one was completing its turn. There was something hypnotic about it. I found myself staring at the clock more intently than ever before, counting each tick-tock in my head. And then it hit me. I was the one making the ticking sound in my mind. The clock itself was silent. I had not heard a single noise all morning. Even my footsteps in the hallway had been soundless. That's when the real fear began to creep in. Outside, the same white fog hung in the air, and there were still no people. My thoughts spiraled. I could not find a logical explanation. Had everyone left? But when? Where? And why did my footsteps make no sound? Everything felt unreal, as though I was not entirely grounded. the sensation of lightness returned, so intense that it felt like I might actually float away. I was suddenly very thirsty. There was still some water left in the filter, so I grabbed it and started drinking. The water went down, but I did not feel a thing. The fear briefly subsided. Dropping the filter on the floor, I picked up the old sandwich and took a bite. Instantly, it felt like I was chewing on a dry, slimy rag. The nausea hit me hard, and I threw the sandwich out the window, rushing out of the kitchen. But as I did, I slipped on the spilled water, smacked my head on the floor, and blacked out. When I came to, that same feeling of lightness engulfed me again, and once more, I could not open my eyes. This time, it only took about 3 minutes before I managed to pry them open. I immediately checked my watch. It was now 3. This time, I could hear the faint ticking of the clock, and for some reason, that tiny sound almost made me happy. It meant I wasn't deaf, and all this was not just in my head. But my head throbbed painfully from the fall, and my thirst had not gone away. Determined, I tried drinking water again, this time straight from the tap. No luck. My first thought was that a person could survive a week without water. I looked outside again. The fog had only thickened, and still, there were no people, no sounds. I began scanning the other windows, hoping to spot something, anything, and that's when the first terrifying thing happened. In one of the windows of the old Soviet building across from mine, on the 7th floor, I saw a silhouette. It was black, with no distinct features, but it looked like a man, tall, probably around 6 feet. He was big, too big. Suddenly, he turned his head toward me. It was hard to see clearly, but I swear he was smiling. They say time slows down when you are scared, and those 6 seconds felt like an eternity. I blinked, and just like that, he vanished, as if he had never been there. I stayed frozen by the window, unsure what to think. I didn't want to dwell on who or what that figure was. It would only make things worse. The situation defied all logic, but one thing was clear. I had to figure out how to get out of this nightmare. I decided to head outside, though the clock seemed to be against me. The hands had crept up to 12, and I had not even noticed how much time had passed. I put off going out until the next day and headed to my room. Passing a mirror on the way, I caught a glimpse of my reflection. My face looked exhausted, and my bright blue eyes had turned a dull gray. Fatigue washed over me again, and as soon as I reached the bed, I collapsed and passed out instantly. That night, I dreamed of the same eerie events, but this time, I was seeing it from the perspective of the figure across the street. It felt like I was flying. The fog had disappeared, and I was looking at my own terrified face. I looked so pathetic. I knew I was about to blink and wake up. At least I hope so. But what happened was much worse. After the other me blinked and stepped away from the window, I, still in the body of that figure, remained standing. My gaze drifted to the window next to mine. Sitting on the windowsill, just 4 meters away, was something grotesque. It vaguely resembled a huge black dog, but it was not quite right. Its body was massive, its tongue long and disgusting, and its thin, elongated arms hung limply at its sides. Its eyes were small, beady, and unsettling. Then, it smiled before slinking back into the shadows of the apartment. I woke up shaking. For some reason, the dream didn't feel like just a dream, and I had a deep sense that I needed to be cautious. Thankfully, I didn't have to struggle with my eyes this time. The thirst and hunger was still there, gnawing at me, but I had to keep moving. I reached for my phone to check the time, but it was dead. I didn't bother trying to charge it. There was only one reliable option left, the kitchen clock. I got out of bed, and it creaked annoyingly. At least the sounds had returned. Trying to move as quietly as possible, almost crouching, I made my way to the kitchen. The clock hands were frozen at 2. Not a bad time. As I crept back to my room, I realized I had not checked the window. The thought of getting close to it made my skin crawl, but curiosity has a way of overpowering fear. I quietly peered outside. The whiteness had intensified to the point where I could not see anything beyond the reach of my hand. Maybe that was for the best. I dressed quickly, realizing how foolish it would be to go out unarmed. I've never been much of a fighter, always believing in solving problems with words, but this felt different. This needed something else. The best I could find was a dull knife. Grabbing the keys, I was about to unlock the door when I remembered the peephole. In our Khrushchevka, the layout is such that my apartment door is closest to the stairs, with the second apartment in the center and the third at the far end. I looked through the peephole and felt my heart drop. The door to the second apartment, the one where that thing was supposed to be, it was knocked down. A disgusting black trail stretched out from inside. I stared through the peephole for 5 minutes, my mind racing, but nothing moved. Finally, I slipped the keys into the lock and quietly opened the door. I stepped out and approached the black trail. It looked like some kind of slime, and every instinct told me not to touch it or even step near it. I carefully skirted around the trail and headed outside. The whiteness was blinding. I could not see more than a hand's length in front of me. I looked closely and saw that the trail led off to the left, toward the park. I had no idea what was waiting for me there, so I turned the other way, carefully watching my steps to avoid the slime. I walked for what felt like forever. A few things became clear. First, I did not encounter a single living thing, not even a trace of one. Second, the silence was absolute. I could hear my own heartbeat echo in my ears. The whiteness did not thin out. If anything, it seemed to grow thicker. A couple of times, I thought I saw that shadowy figure again. Eventually, I realized I wasn't alone. Listening carefully, I heard something crawling nearby. Not walking, crawling. I could tell from the sound of something dragging its body, one part after another. My first thought was the dog. But then, why had it not attacked me? For reasons I could not explain, I stopped in my tracks. Night was falling. Feeling around, I found a wall and some kind of ledge. I sat down and listened. The crawling continued, but not in my direction. What happened next will stay with me forever, haunting my nightmares. I heard a sound, like something sinking into slime. I did not have to guess what it was. Somewhere in the distance, an inhuman scream tore through the air, followed by wild, unsettling laughter. The noise was so powerful that the whiteness seemed to retreat for a moment, and that's when I saw my companion. It was an old man, around 60. He looked blind, and maybe deaf too. My mind reeled. Were there other people here? Where had he come from? 2 minutes later, I heard something huge rushing toward us. In an instant, I jumped over a low fence and buried myself in the bushes behind it. Soon, a creature from my dream appeared around the corner. In an instant, it grabbed the old man with its disgusting hands and began to devour him. If I had any food in my stomach, I would have thrown up. It fed on him, tearing him apart for what felt like 20 minutes. When it finally finished, the creature started scanning the area. I pressed myself flat against the ground, trying not to make a sound. My eyes flicked toward an iron pole with a red M on top. There was a metro station nearby. The creature didn't seem in a hurry to leave. After about 10 more minutes, it smashed down the door to an apartment building and disappeared inside. I realized waiting for the whiteness to return was pointless. My only plan was to get up and sprint to the metro. For some reason, I was sure the trains were still running. I gripped my knife, ready to act, but soon heard that familiar, chilling laugh from above. When I looked up, there it was, staring down at me with that grotesque grin. Panic set in. The only thing I could think to do was to throw my knife at it. I wasn't a good shot, and the blade was dull, but somehow it worked. The knife flew straight into its eye, and the creature let out a piercing scream. I ran like I had never run before. In 10 seconds, I covered the distance to the metro and dove inside. I had underestimated the creature. It was right behind me, only 5 meters away. The pain did not seem to slow it down. I vaulted over a railing and rushed into the station. To my immense relief, a train was waiting. I stumbled halfway up the stairs and twisted my ankle. It could have been fatal, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I don't remember exactly how I made it to the train, but I practically flew through the doors. They closed just in time, slicing off the creature's arm. I heard its distant, agonized squeal, that same horrific sound from my dream. The worst was finally behind me. I collapsed into a seat, my mind racing. What if the creature was waiting for me at the next station? I couldn't stay on the train forever. Exhaustion first and hunger crept back in, overwhelming me. I began to lose consciousness. Just as I was slipping away, a hand caught me and laid me down gently. It was him, the man in black. Now I could see him clearly. Black sneakers, pants, shirt, and hair. His eyes were brown, and his smile was mocking, filled with a cruel amusement. Sleep is the only thing he said. The last thing I saw before passing out was a station board with 2 unfamiliar names. When I woke up, I was back in the real world. A security guard was shaking me awake and dragging me out of the train. The station was Karivno, but I lived on Pervo-Maiskaya. Of course, the next day, I went straight to a psychologist, but they could not help. I sought out fortune tellers, psychics, even psychiatrists. No one had answers. Naturally, I did not tell my father anything. I scoured the internet, looking for similar stories. The only one that came close was about an empty city, where a creature steals the souls of people who are forgotten or unwanted. It feeds on them. I found nothing about the man in black. My guess is that he is some kind of guardian angel or something like that. I still don't know why there was a metro in that place or how it was running. I also don't know how I got there or how I got out. Not much time has passed since then, but my life is different now. I'm actively connecting with people, both online and in real life. My theory is this. Sometimes there is a glitch and people who no one thinks about or remembers end up in that place. There's a way out, maybe more than one, but you have to be careful. Every time I post these, people say I'm LARPing. Okay, here goes. B12. Live in shithole town in Arkansas. Always have burn nights in our burn barrel. Great grandma had a bunch of creepy dolls that we think were haunting the house, so we burn them. We'll post about those happenings after this. Anyway, Dad and Mom were sauced, smoking weed inside. I decided to go back out to the fire to chill and rub fireflies on my arms. I'm all alone. Dogs won't follow me for some reason. Standing in gravel carport. Dogs are just barking, one is whining. Wonder what the fuck they're barking at. Squint to see the edge of the yard. Had a bunch of uninhabited land and a creek behind our house, but was separated by a stone wall plus a fence on top. See what looks like a pale humanoid. Had no face or fingers or toes. Looked like a squid, kind of. At least the head did. Was about 6 feet tall. It just stayed there, completely motionless. Never made any movement or sound. My head started to hurt. My vision started to blur. I pass out. Wake up in the bathtub in different clothes, an outfit I never even owned, actually. Was about midnight when I woke up. Had a dream about the Baldur's Gate game I was currently playing for some reason. In the dream, I was absorbed by the gelatin cube enemies in the game. For some reason was scared. Parents and friends never believed me. We'll continue with spooks about the house and the ghosts in it, and various UFOs me and my family have seen in the area. Maybe even post about the spooks in other states. House we lived in was definitely haunted. Used to be part of a larger house that enveloped the whole block. Was a slave-owning plantation. One night, playing Vice City, and have to pay. Go from my room to the bathroom, and on the way, see the ghost of an old lady. She was wearing a pink silk dress with sunflowers on it. Looked almost Japanese, but the old lady ghost was white. She had no hands, but was wearing matching pink silk slippers/shoes. She also had no eyes, just dark holes. She reached up at me. Instinct takes over. I scream as loud as I can and run through her. Was very cold and icy inside her. I go inside the bathroom and shut and lock the door. Scream for my mommy. Since I locked the door like a dumbass, she couldn't even get in. When we first moved into that house, she had so many dolls. One in particular was very creepy. It was an angel made of ceramic. I was trying to sleep on the couch, and the doll had her hands out like she was holding something. In her hands, a glowing ball of blue light. I remember feeling very peaceful and went straight to sleep. Now, here is the creepy part. Next day, think I like sleeping in darkness more. Look for the plug in a nearby wall socket to unplug the doll. It had no lights or any sort of cords running to it. Would often swim at night in our inflatable pool. Was very humid and hot in the summers. If you've been to Arkansas, you would know. Laying back on a floaty, looking at the clear sky. Saw what looked like a rocket fly across the sky. It was very bright and went faster than any plane I've ever seen in my life. Was slower than a shooting star though. Some say it was meteor or a satellite or even the ISS. Went on a pretty particular path, so maybe they are right, but it gave me a creepy vibe. Second UFO I saw in AR. Be driving with my mom to McDonald's. Wanted some late night burgers, nuggets, and fries. Don't worry, I'm not fat and never will be. See a triangle-shaped UFO above us. It keeps warping, in a triangle formation. Like it would be here, then there, and then in another place, but only in a triangle shape. We start talking about it. Dad is like, yeah, whatever. He was always a skeptic until he saw a ghost of his friend that took his own life. We'll post about that later. Anyway, after warping around for a while, UFO goes to the center of triangle formation. Each of the 3 lights shoots off, each in the direction of the triangle formation it was making earlier. Could be military shit, who knows. Okay, I'll post the rest of the spooky shit now. Definitely not everything that's happened to me. We'll post lesser spoofs if I feel like it. Dad lived in girlfriend's house. Her mom took her own life because her brother died years ago and she couldn't take it anymore. Dad goes out for dinner. Friend says, you go on without me. You'll see me when you get back. When Dad gets back, friend is hanging in the closet, dead. Dad is not afraid of the dark, so he's chilling in the dark of a dead man's house. Sees the guy's ghost with no eyes. Walks into a mirror in the hallway. Later that night, or just later on, he had a dream about the guy who took his own life. Kept saying, you gotta get my eyes back. My eyes. Apparently, his eyes were donated to a kid in California so he could regain his sight. Okay, was making food but whatever. I think I can post this before it burns. B23. Living in California. Live up in some hills in the Bay Area. Smoking a bowl on my back porch. Porch light is out, so it is really dark. Hear footsteps about 20 to 40 feet down the hill of my yard. Sounded like someone wearing shoes. Definitely human sounding. Use the light on my LG smartphone. Couldn't see shit. Could still hear the footsteps, now getting closer. Say fuck that and go inside. Locked door. Wasn't allowed to smoke inside. Was my family's house. Say fuck it and smoke weed in the garage. Can hear still. Someone crunching around in my yard. Yard was very big and slanted, so you could easily lay down or hide behind a tree. I come back out with a more powerful light and my bastard sword. Scream at the top of my lungs and charge the tree where I heard footsteps. Start chopping at the tree, looping branches off. Be full-blown autismo and say, get the fuck off my property or I'll cut off your head and violate your dead body. Heard someone run away into the neighbor's bushes. Neighbor was super old and retired, so it was not him. Couldn't shine the light in time. Whoever or whatever it was very fast. A couple nights later, I saw a pale, naked humanoid, kind of like in my previous post, jump my other neighbor's fence. Saw that one from my bedroom though, which was in the garage. So, this isn't my story, but it's one my wife shared just the other day. Not especially scary, but something that I, as a skeptic, found modestly intriguing. I won't go into much detail, but my wife coordinates big budget programs at a very important national landmark. I am not going to name names, but if you're American or have any interest in American history, then you are already familiar with her workplace. It's a centuries-old property that receives many visitors each year, but which doesn't typically let non-employees enter the grounds after sunset, with the exception of a handful of candlelight tours each year, as well as the odd fireworks display. Anyway, to make a long story short, a small group of visiting professionals who were being sponsored by her organization showed up outside the site 2 nights back, buzzed security, and asked if there was any chance they could enter the grounds to take a picture of the strawberry moon. Security was purportedly a bit perplexed by the request, but, surprisingly, agreed to let them in. The officer who authorized the request told them that there were no other visitors or employees present, and that they could wander around the back of one of the main historic buildings to take their pictures, provided that they not act disruptive and leave within 10 to 15 minutes. So, these people did exactly what they said they were going to do, took some pictures, lounged in some chairs for a few minutes, and then started heading back to the entrance. On their way back around the main building, they stopped to take a picture of the iconic facade when they noticed the very obvious flicker of flame or candlelight inside one of the windows. They told my wife that it was very clearly emanating from inside the building, and was too bright, vivid, and dynamic to have been a reflection or a refraction. Furthermore, there were no outdoor sources of light. On the way out, they asked security to reaffirm whether they were the only persons on the property before telling one of the on-duty officers what they saw. The officer immediately went off to investigate, because A, nobody else should have been on site, and B, there are no artificial sources of light inside the building that would have been turned on or activated, and C, it's a fucking centuries-old wooden building, and an open flame is very obviously a hazard. Security obviously did not find anyone there, and there was no light by the time they arrived. Here's the part that I, as an actual skeptic, find intriguing. The visitors took photographs of the facade on their way in, which showed all of the windows being as dark and unlit as they should have been. They also took a picture of the light, which my wife showed me. It's honestly a little hard for me to explain. It's bright as fucking day, has a noticeably fire-like center, e.g., much darker shades of red and orange at its base, and is in the approximate shape of a period-appropriate oil lamp. There is also a bluish ring around it, of the sort that you get when you take a picture of a fire. Beyond that, it also seems to be very much within the building. You can see some of the light reflected on one of the window panes. I'm going to try to post the pictures later after checking with my wife. They're not mine to share, and they were just taken the other day by people collaborating with and being sponsored by her organization. If she's not cool with it now, I will just try to crop them to a point where the building is not recognizable. So, not super fucking scary, but I don't believe in any of the shit and found it spoopy enough to not have a good explanation. This isn't paranormal, but I know the guy totally fucking shit bricks. Me 15, girlfriend 16. Other side of town, about 11:30. Getting bus home. Me and her sit at the front because we won't be on long and no one else is on. First stop. Big drunk guy, about 35-ish, gets on with his sober girlfriend. I assume it was his girlfriend. Before he is even on the bus, I can hear how leery he is. Stares at me as he walks past. Look at him. He stops walking and says, "What are you fucking looking at?" Woman he gets on with starts pushing him from behind so they can sit down. I'm a quiet type of guy and could not be at all bothered with the hassle. Don't even respond to him. Me and my cutie pie are sitting pretty quietly. Can hear the guy a few seats behind me keep saying he's going to smash me as soon as I get off the bus. Girl keeps telling him to shut up because we are only kids. Starts getting really angry and shaking the seat in front of him. I don't turn around. I know you can fucking hear me. I'm going to fucking do you when you get off the bus. Stand up for our stop, still looking straight ahead. Hear him starting to get up. Remember I have a decent-sized hunting knife in my coat from the weekend. Hear him say again how he's sick of me and going to smash my face in. Pull knife out of my pocket and pretend that I'm trying to conceal it against my arm. Guy is suddenly quiet. Turn around, and he is still sat in his seat, but gone a wider shade of pale. Wait until he looks at me. Ask him if he's getting off at the stop. Puts his head down. Bus starts pulling away, and he jumps up and starts shouting out of the window. I really don't know what I would have done had he gotten off. I know if I didn't have the knife, he would definitely have tried to attack me though.